In this video, you're going to learn how to write quadratic equations in vertex form by completing the square. We're going to work with two examples, one where a is equal to 1 and one where a is not equal to 1. So let's dive in. I'm going to go through the steps you're going to want to follow. So let's dive into this first example, y equals x squared minus 14x plus 1. So we're trying to take it from the standard form into this vertex form. And so the first thing you want to do is you want to subtract the constant to the other side of the equation. Basically what you want to do is you want to get this 1 kind of out of the way. So I'm going to move it to the left side here by subtracting 1. Okay, so now that gives us y minus 1 is equal to x squared minus 14x. Okay, so now what we're going to do, step number 2, is we want to factor out the leading coefficient, this a value here, the number that comes in front of the x squared term. So in this case, you can see that leading coefficient is just a 1. So factoring out a 1 is really not going to do anything in this particular problem. But in the second one we do, it'll be important. Now for step number 3, you want to take b divided by 2, the quantity squared, and you want to add it to both sides. And I've got this note here that you're going to want to be careful, and you'll see how that plays out in the second example. So remember, our b value is the number that comes in front of the x. So in this case, that's the negative 14. You might want to do this work off to the side. You take negative 14 divided by 2, that's b divided by 2, the quantity squared. That's negative 7 squared, which is 49. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add 49 to the right side. You're going to want to add 49 to the left side to keep this equation balanced. Now we're just going to simplify. Okay, so y plus 48 equals x squared minus 14x plus 49. We want to factor the perfect square that we created. That's this guy right here, this perfect square trinomial. And when you factor it, it's going to factor into a binomial squared. It's always going to be half of this b value. So it would be x minus 7, the quantity squared. If this was plus 14x, it would be plus 7. So always half of that b value. And then for the last step, we want to get this y by itself. Step number 5. So here we're going to subtract the 48 to get it over here to the other side. And that's going to give us, let's see, y is equal to x minus 7 squared minus 48. Now we have it in the vertex form. We can see our vertex is at positive 7, negative 48. Remember, the number that's grouped with the x has the opposite effect. The minus 7 is actually shifting the graph right 7. If it was plus 7, it would go left 7. And this k value has the same effect. It's going to go down 48. Let's take a look at another example. Okay, for number 2 now, let's take a look. We've got f of x equals 5x squared minus 40x plus 7. The f of x, you can think of this as just y, okay, just for simplicity's sake. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow these steps. We're going to subtract the constant to the other side. Now when I say subtract, if it was a negative 7, I would just add the 7 to the other side. But we basically want to move the constant to the other side just to get it out of the way. So we'll subtract 7 from both sides. Okay, so that's going to give us y minus 7 equals 5x squared minus 40x. Okay, step number 2 now, we want to factor out the leading coefficient, that's the a value, the number that comes in front of the x squared term. And when I say factor out this leading coefficient, this 5, some students mistakenly factor out the greatest common factor, which would be 5x. We just want the a value, just the 5, so just be careful with that. So that's going to be x squared minus 8x. And what I like to do also is put a little space here because we're going to complete the square. Now, if you get a little bit confused about this factoring out, what some students like to do is just put a little fraction bar and you're dividing by 5. So what I'm doing is I'm just reducing, see, x squared, negative 8x. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to figure out what b divided by 2 is squared. So this is the completing the square process. We say, okay, here's our b value, negative 8. It's the number in front of the x. We're going to go over here to the side. B divided by 2 squared. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to add 16 here, and this is where you want to be careful because it looks like we're adding 16 to the right side of the equation, right? But because the 16 is in parentheses, it's actually 5 times 16, which is 80, that we're adding to the right side of the equation, in effect, right? So we have to add 80 to the left to keep this equation balanced. Are you with me? You don't want to just add 16 and 16. You're going to get the wrong answer. It's actually 5 times 16 out of thin air. We're adding 80 to the right. We want to add 80 to the left. Step number 4, we want to factor the perfect square that we created here. And remember the little shortcut for doing that, it's always going to be half of this b value. So it's going to be x minus 4, the quantity squared. If this was plus 8x, it would be x plus 4. Okay, so now we'll simplify on the left side. This is going to be y plus 73. Okay, and now the last step is just to get y by itself by moving this constant to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 73 from both sides of the equation, keep it balanced. So we get y equals 5 times x minus 4 squared minus 73, and that's in our vertex form. You can see our vertex is going to be at positive 4, negative 73. Remember, it's the opposite here. Whenever we group with the x, it's the opposite. If this was plus 4, this would be negative 4. This one's the same effect. It's going down 73. The 5 is our a value that's stretching the graph by a factor of 5. That's going to make it narrower. It's going to go up faster. And you got it. So if you want to see more examples, you want to test yourself, you want more practice, which I recommend, follow me over to that video that I did there. We'll get some more practice. I'll see you over there.